Hey guys, many of my students tell me that listening is the thing that they have the most trouble with. And even once they start to get more comfortable with a teacher or a friend, it's still a little difficult when they start to meet new people. Today, let's talk about some of the reasons that it's so difficult to understand native speakers and what you can start to listen for that's going to help you improve your English listening. Are you guys ready to find out how you can go about improving your English listening? If so, then let's get into it. There are many ways that English is different from how it is taught in a textbook. Things that you would never see in a textbook are actually used in English all of the time. There are lots of rules that get broken, and sometimes just by following all of the rules as they're taught, you can really start to sound more like a textbook and less like a real native speaker. I'm sure there's something similar in your native language. Language is often taught very differently from how people speak it when you meet them. I remember how I could confidently answer all of the questions in my Japanese textbook, but living in the small town that I live in now, I have still yet to come across anyone who sounds like those textbooks. You need to be able to talk and listen to how real people speak. You also need to be prepared that you're not going to understand everything that is being said to you at all times, and this is okay. Don't focus on what you don't know, just try to keep your focus on what you do know and the context that it's being spoken in. This will go a long way to help you pick up on what is being said. If you're at a fast food counter, the odds of that person asking you about your food order are high. Maybe you notice it with your friends, TV shows, movies, or even music, but native speakers don't always speak clearly when they're using English. We like to push our words together when we speak. I often tell a lot of my students when I'm trying to explain to them how a native speaker sounds that it's almost like you're listening to one big long run-on word or long run-on sentence. Everything just starts to run together, and this is what we can think of as connected speech. This is how words are linked together in natural, fluent speech. There's a few things that you're going to have to start listening for in English. We have elision, in which you're going to be leaving out certain sounds when speaking. For example, I don't know becomes I don't know. Or history becomes history. These sounds just naturally fade away, so really listen closely when you're speaking to a native speaker. There is also assimilation when a sound changes based on the neighboring sound. For example, I'll meet you there sounds a little more like I'll meet you there. Here, the T and the Y are assimilating. When she meets you, she'll love you sounds more like when she meets you, she'll love you. Here, the TS and the Y start to sound alike. This happens when a word that ends in R is followed by a word that begins with a vowel. For example, car owner sounds more like car owner, and bear attack sounds more like bear attack. Can you hear how those R and those vowel sounds are starting to run together? For example, fish and chips sounds more like fish and chips. Here, the and becomes very soft. To also becomes t. For example, I have to go back to work tomorrow. This is a very brief overview of connected speech. If you understand how connected speech is used, you're going to be able to pick up English a lot easier when you're listening to native speakers. Have you noticed any of these when you're talking to natives? If so, how about letting me know down in the comments below? I'd like to know what you've picked up on when you're listening to English. Contractions is a word made by shortening and combining two words together. English speakers will almost always use contractions. You probably won't hear I am from California, but you'll definitely hear me saying I'm from California. Here are some common ones that you can listen for. I'm, your, their, he's, she's, it's. Some more examples are I've, you've, we've, or they've. Listen closely and you'll also be able to pick up I'll, we'll, you'll, or they'll. Other examples include can't, didn't, won't. You can also listen for coulda, woulda, or shoulda. And last but not least, there's let's, there's, and that's. There are so many different ways that you can shorten and combine words into contractions. We also have informal contractions. For example, have to and want to can become pushed together in natural speech. Have you ever heard someone say, I have to go home soon, or I want to stay a little bit longer? This is a very common way of speaking, but it does make it difficult for non-native speakers to pick up what's being said. Listen for informal contractions like this the next time that you have a conversation with a native speaker. Your listening will get better the more comfortable that you can become with contractions. Here are some other ones that you can listen for. Used to, kinda, lotsa, Ida, heeda. Make it a habit of listening to formal and informal contractions when you're talking to native speakers. The last thing that I'll talk about today is learning idioms and slang. When you are learning English, you usually just learn the grammatically correct way of saying something. But most people just don't speak this way. If I talk to my friends or family back home, there's gonna be lots of slang and people will be using idioms. It just sounds more interesting and natural, and you can really get a feel of the speaker's personality. And I'm sure that when you speak in your own native language, you probably do similar things. Unless we're in a formal or academic setting, most people just don't speak the way that you learn in a book. Here are some slang words that I hear a lot. Rent-free, which means an obsession or to dominate someone's thoughts. For example, that team has been living rent-free in their heads since that game last week. Extra, which means dramatic, attention-grabbing, or just too much. For example, you don't have to be so extra about it. Salty isn't just a flavor, it means to behave in an irritated, resentful, or bitter way. For example, he has been salty ever since he was rejected for the position. Another one is shook, which means stunned or shocked. For example, she was so shook she couldn't speak. There are so many more ways to use slang and idioms, and they always keep changing and evolving. But they are important to be aware of if you want to improve your listening. Even if you never use them yourself, it's important to know slang and idioms because it's just how real people speak. I hope that these help you. There's so much more, but you can only put so much into one video. If you're interested in improving your listening even more, how about check out this video right here. See you.